Hi there, I'm Ian Willoughby and you're extremely welcome to episode 9 of Czech Next Wave, a podcast from the Czech Centres Network and Radio Prague International. This podcast is all about bringing talented young Czechs to listeners around the globe. And this time out we've got a very special guest, Conductor Jakub Hrůša. At the age of just 39, Jakub is already a major name in classical music. He's the chief conductor of the Bamberg Symphony and principal conductor of the Czech Philharmonic here in Prague, as well as regularly wielding his baton with many of the world's top orchestras. For me, speaking to such a brilliant man as Jakub Hrůša was a genuine experience, and I hope you get just as much pleasure from our conversation now in this edition of Czech Next Wave. My first question is, at what age did it start to become apparent that you had a great facility for music?
Oh, you should ask my parents. I'm not sure really. I remember the kindergarten, probably somewhere there I might have shown abilities for rhythm and melodies and remembering music and liking music. It must have been there because as I was there, so age 4 or 5, there came a delegation from a newly established project with increased amount of music taught at school, at primary school. It was a new project which would be launched from the next year, and they probably in the area, basically in Brno, where I was born, and they were searching for kids who would be interested in this. And I think there was no question as soon as we had the situation of this choice being in front of us. So there was no question for my parents that I should go there, because it seemed to be an absolutely amazing project where more music would be included in the primary education. And as I see it now backwards, I think I was extremely lucky and privileged and happy as a child to be a member of such a class. I think the idea behind it was basically, apart from altruistic reasons and conviction that this is good for children anyway, I think also was the idea that later on everyone in that class would form some musical band, an orchestra, something like that. It meant that every single pupil of that class of ours played an instrument, learned an instrument. Some people, like I, even two. Now, as a parent, seeing the landscape of education we have around us, I think it was an extremely enlightened way of entering life as a kid, with music, present every day. Basically, as soon as we started learning about letters and reading texts, we started learning notes and reading musical texts and rhythms and so on. So I think somewhere there, I wouldn't hide that I was probably the most interested in music in our class. I mean, I seemed to be obsessed by it, and everything went very easily for me. Soon I would have started helping our teacher with some, little things here and there, and playing piano, accompanying other kids and so on. But it wasn't anything extremely exposed. It was just a bonus to my life. I took music as something natural, something which belongs to our lives. And it seems stunning to me until this day that for someone, music is absent. And I still can't, figure out how that would be possible for other people. So that's about my story as I was a kid.
You later studied conducting at the Faculty of Music at the Academy of Performing Arts here in Prague. Obviously, from today's perspective, that looks like a wonderful choice. But why did you go for conducting?
As I tried to explain, music was something I couldn't live without. The only problem for me was at the end of my primary education, so we're speaking about age of 14, I think, or 13, 14, there came a choice to go to the conservatory. And of course, this choice as an option was around me. Some teachers mentioned it, and my parents, I think, reflected on it too. And at that point, my revolt, my adolescent or pubescent revolt was, no, I won't go for a musical education, I will go for a universal education. I will go what we call gymnasium. And it was there at the age of 15 or 16 where I realized ultimately that I can't, at least as an attempt, I can't live without music as a profession, some sort of connection to music. And at the same time, I had a very strong intuition that I wouldn't like to choose, such a path of a instrumentalist, like playing one instrument only. It was a little too narrow to my mind back then. I thought about composing, and I tried at that age to start composing, studying composing in a very loose way. But it also didn't seem to me, maybe I was too self-critical, I see it these days. But I thought, how can I cope with those amazing masters of the past and have an ambition to create music which, in my eyes would be good enough. So it wasn't. So I thought I loved orchestra. I played in various orchestras as a trombonist and also occasionally as a pianist. And I was a member of a student orchestra. And I observed at that point the work of conductors, especially one of them, a later friend of mine, who were absolutely amazing. And I was inspired and I wanted to try myself. And at that student orchestra, still at the grammar school, I was given a chance to conduct my mates, basically. And if I may say now, with some sort of idealistic, improvement of the memory, I think I was in my element. I loved it from the first instant, and everyone around me just thought, wow, it just works. And so it kind of confirmed my vision that conducting would be the right thing for me. And I tested it by trying to get to the Academy of Performing Arts right from the grammar school, which was very unusual because usually the path went through the conservatory. And I succeeded. And still, the next confirmation of the right path, probably having been chosen, was the competition, Prague Spring Festival competition, as I was in the first year of my university studies. And I got some prizes for the youngest participant. I was the only Czech participant among few who advanced into the second round and further. So I thought, yes, I think I found my vocation, my love, my life profession. And since then, I've been happy doing this.
Maybe this will sound like a naive question, but when you learn to conduct, what exactly are you learning? I guess that's another way of saying, what are the skills that you need to be a top-class conductor?
I think we have to make portions out of it. So I think there is a technique, of course. I mean, conducting ultimately is waving your arms and hands in front of an orchestra, and you have to communicate non-verbally, and you have to have some talent to do it well. It doesn't say it's like a language, because you can use your own means how to communicate. And we know many conductors who are extremely eloquent doing it, and also others who are more clumsy, but still very good or excellent conductors. So I think it says already that manual technique isn't the main thing, although it's very helpful if one can show well to the orchestra. And so as I was preparing myself for the exams at the Academy of Performing Arts, of course, I searched through my friends and found an amazing private teacher who taught me how to conduct with your hands. He also helped me discover how to read the score, because an orchestra score is rather a difficult enterprise. I mean, it really takes time to figure out what's there. The basics are easy, all instruments playing at the same time, all's notated. But it's the details are rather difficult. There are a lot of transpositions, a lot of clefs, that means some codes, how it's written for various instruments, and a lot of markings, and not even speaking about the meaning of it and what's important, what's less important. But I must say honestly that this already is a matter which everyone has to solve somewhat privately. I mean, you profit from having a teacher who helps you. But unlike manual technique, I think you basically need to live with the scores and love it passionately all the time of your life, at least when you're studying, and learn a lot about it. The meaning, how to learn it is it's a long adventure. I mean, you have to learn the theory, about harmony, about counterpoint, about musical forms and tectonics, about orchestration, of course, have some knowledge about history of music. And in a way, it seems to be somewhat secondary when you really conduct as such. But without this background and this knowledge, you just even can't fancy to start thinking about conducting, because I think a conductor must be a natural authority to a band in front of which he or she stands. And I think the knowledge of the score, which is not like memorizing, is also good, but it's not like computer science. You don't need to be mechanistic about it. What you need is to handle the meaning and content of the score and the style of it, and ultimately then you stand there and you have to work with the energy of people. I mean, that all what I have described until now is only the preparation, but the conducting as such is basically working with the energy and minds of the musicians who you basically serve, help, and inspire. And that is the hardest task to learn at school, because unless you really start working with people, you don't know whether you're good at it or not. You just have to try. And that's why I was, I think, very lucky, and also I tried really hard to organize that in my life, that I started conducting regularly from the very start, not only learning it at the table, so to speak, but having weekly sessions with student orchestras and concert, and try and error style works too. I mean, you have to test yourself, what you can do, what you can't do, where to improve, where your strong sides.
From the outside, it looks like your career has just been one success after the other. But for you, was there any one moment that you felt was like a breakthrough or a real turning point in your career?
If we speak about the very beginnings of my career, so I think the first moment I stood in front of an orchestra was a breakthrough, because it can be a very confusing situation. I mean, I must say it also wasn't exactly what I had expected. It's interesting maybe to tell other people, somewhat like when you go driving for the first time. So you know the mechanics of it, but still the car really works differently. But I think on a personal level, I enjoyed it a lot. I was in my element. And I think it was the first breakthrough. The second was after getting to the Academy of Performing Arts, the Prague Spring Festival, which I mentioned too. The success there was a confirmation of the right path. I thought in my first year, okay, now I study music, I study conducting as I always wanted. But what if I just won't be successful enough to, to have it as a meaningful profession? And that got confirmed. The third breakthrough was getting into contact with Jiří Bělohlavek, who was an inspiring teacher and later friend of mine, and about whom as teacher I had dreamt for a long time. And he was kind enough to accept me as a student after recognizing some starting successes of mine. So that was another breakthrough, because not having met him, my life would have been different. I'm absolutely sure about that, because he was a very important influence, both in energizing my studies and also relaxing them, because before meeting him, I maybe was a bit too obsessed with my own career. And he kind of, with his kind confirmation of my talent, he relaxed me a lot. And then the graduation concert in 2004, for which I chose a very unusual and demanding piece by Josef Suk, my love since, a composer I try to help with all my authority and possibilities. And this Josef Suk's Azrael Symphony caused such swirl, such attention, such critical response, that basically, including some agents being present, and it was really probably as convincing as possible. And since then, I entered, the international career, and this, I think, was absolutely essential because I know so many fantastic conductors and amazingly talented people. And I would say, with no false modesty, that some of them more talented than I was and somewhat disposed to be great conductors. But this chance to enter the right door at the right time somewhat wasn't given to them. And I was given that opportunity, and that was a glorious thing. I mean, it was an amazing feeling that basically the day after your graduation, you signed the contract with the World Agency, and you think, okay, my future will somewhat be helped, even if I struggle for some time.
You are the principal conductor of the Bamberg Symphony. You're also the principal guest conductor of the Czech Philharmonic and also at the London Philharmonia, and you've performed all over the world. I'm curious, do audiences differ much? Are there some places where people respond more passionately, or are there other countries where they're more kind of thoughtful in their response?
I think so. And not only the audiences, but also the orchestras themselves. I think the mentalities of orchestras differ. And it's good so, because otherwise it would be too gray, the landscape of culture. I wouldn't, on the other hand, like to be generalizing too much. I mean, no one would be surprised that maybe an Italian or Spanish audience is a bit wilder than a German one, or that, Japanese can be showing signs of admiration and faithfulness to music and musicians in even more lasting way than I don't know, people in other countries. It differs. At the same time, I try not to read too much into it, because I think what matters for us performers is to be authentic, to be yourself. I mean, to be doing equally great artistic job anywhere you go. And job is a strange thing. I would say inspire people, your mission, your life mission. And sometimes you get more helped. As I said, I mean, if anyone has performed and got to be liked by audiences in Japan, that one will know what I mean about real devotion to classical music there. If you perform in Vienna, still the audience can create such an amazing contact with you as a performer. Both these countries show their love to you as conductor by, sometimes calling you alone on stage when orchestra has gone already, which is an extremely beautiful gesture. I also learned about certain places like New York, where in the first instance, sometimes one is surprised by the shortness of the applause and by a departure of members of the audience rather shortly after the performance has finished. But after learning about that being rather usual, you also recognize when the audience gets really excited how fantastic the response can be.
You mentioned Josef Suk, and I was curious if, when you conduct Czech music, especially outside this country, do you feel any special attachment to it in a way that you wouldn't to music from other countries?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I always felt very naturally that I would offer repertoire from my home country everywhere where I go, although it would be false to think that my repertoire is somewhat limited, or that I am too much focused on that or pigeonholed. I think, no, I had a research at one point and realized it's not as much Czech music as sometimes might seem like. But of course, I feel a very special attachment to it, which is very beautiful to live. And I sense the inspiration. I think that's the word which I mentioned already once today, the authenticity. I think in a very globalized way, the world operates now, and we could speak long about what's good about it and what's bad about it. I think people appreciate someone who is close, really close, without speculating to some cultural source of meaningful depths and beauties. And I'm proud, of course, because we are a relatively small country. And so many excellent composers recognized everywhere in the world, starting with Dvořák, of course, but going on through Smetana, Janáček, and Martinu and Suk, probably, and others, Fibich and Kabelaj and Novak and Förster and so on. It fills me with pride, and I'm very happy to share music of those people with other orchestras. The nicest situations are those where the music is still a great discovery, but not probably foreign or not totally strange to the orchestras. That happens to me with music by Suk or Martinu, where we discover some pieces which haven't been played much or ever by the specific orchestra, and really discovering music of amazing qualities to which I'm very close, and then hearing the musicians and the audiences, oh my God, how possible that we didn't know this before? How could we ignore this music? It's amazing. You know, what else could be a more beautiful gift to me as an ambassador than hearing this? My responsibility is not to stay with the most popular pieces all the time, not to stay always with the Barton Bride and the New World Symphony and Cello Concerto by Dvořák, and I don't know, the Cunning Little Vixen, but choosing other pieces and increasing the repertoire of orchestras and inspiring people who may meet music of these composers for the first time. I mean, it's stunning. I take it almost for granted, but now speaking to you about this, I realize again how extraordinary it is that music you love from your country resonates everywhere in the world with so much power and love being given back to it. So I'm really amazed every single time.
Why do you think it is that the Czech Republic, a country of less than 11 million people, is such a power in music, does produce so many great composers, musicians, conductors?
I have some sort of rough theories about it. So first of all, it's a geographical position and history of our country, of course. So we are and have always been a part of the Central European region. And of course, our neighbors, both West and South, are arguably the most important sources of at least symphonic music in the history of music. The German-speaking countries, basically since Bach at least, and if we don't count maybe bel canto and Italian opera and something more specific, which wouldn't be, for this argument, wouldn't be as important. I think music, and let's say in my realm, in my area, the symphonic music is at home there. Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert, Schumann, Wagner, Brahms, Bruckner, Mahler, Strauss, that all is German-speaking countries, if you want it or not. And I think we are an absolutely integral part of that region, to an extent which in the 18th century was really excessive. I mean, Bohemian musicians were always considered one of the best in Europe. And I think the local, countryside forces, the more naive circumstances, the way how stuff was taught at primary schools, always full of music, those cantors, Regenschoris, the teachers, the local teachers who always played instruments, sang and so on, folk music, the thing which in the German eyes at some points were considered a sign of inferiority, like we were peasants, basically, not so educated because of the history before, the German-speaking element was always the leading in education at that time, and it took hundreds of years to get recognized again in the Czech-speaking sphere. I think it paradoxically supported the musical talent in the regions of the country. I also think that politically our country didn't do pretty well, I mean, in the 19th century, it was rather a lost battle in recognition of Bohemia and Moravia, unlike Hungarians who got much more in the context of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So I think basically the creativity, literature, music, of course, visual arts and things like that, that was the area where the confidence and the ambition and talent of local people were aimed. That was the area where the country and the nation flourished, basically. And I think this combination of being close to a very advanced culture of German-speaking music, musicality, and having these local sources of, a straightforward inspiration, created a very unique combination, which really, I think, if you take Antonín Dvořák, I mean, our in the world most famous composer, he was exactly that. He was as much inspired by the German canon of music, and later, of course, others as well, Slavonic, as by the folk culture, dances and songs and religion and whatever you name. And I think this straightforwardness of our music, it's, if you will, it's a bit too far, but it's democratic quality, that it speaks to the hearts of everyone. It's not overcomplicated, and yet in its best forms, it really stands up to the best among the German composers. I think created some very, very special composers, such as Dvořák, Smetana or Janáček, who really went their own original path, but at the same time were in constant contact with the advanced culture around them.
My final question, Jakub, is you have accomplished so much already, but do you still have some ultimate goal or some height that you'd still love to reach?
Not such one that it would be easy to explain to the listeners. I try to describe what my path was like, and I realized somehow that goal which I established for myself as a teenager, say, hasn't changed at all. I mean, one shouldn't think, though, that after having this or that success, that one stops being critical to oneself. I mean, actually, however strange it sounds, the older I get, the more critical I am to myself. On one hand, I don't have stresses of the beginner, of course. I know what I'm doing and I have loads of experience. But at the same time, I somehow get less easily satisfied or happy with the results. So it's a constant search, and the goals I could honestly speak about would be two. I mean, on a subtle level, on a more personal level, getting even more, connected and deeper understanding the music I'm performing, to get a deeper knowledge, and then to be more inspiring to people I conduct and to who I conduct in the audiences. And the second thing is connected to it. I mean, this word inspiration, that's probably the hardest task for anyone going on in one profession for a long time, to be able to increase, energize the ability to inspire. And I think life is endless in how it can inspire you. And so being more and more open and somehow, receptive to life and to the world around you, to be able to give back the inspiration you get from elsewhere back to the world, back to people, concrete people, including the closest family, and somehow in a harmonious way that you don't get really crazy, but find a balance in your passion. I think that's a never-ending task. This is much more important to me than concrete places where I want to be or concrete pieces I want to conduct. Because in that area, I've had so much already past me that I don't dream in that way. But even more so, because of that, my motives to be better are somehow more interior, somehow more in your soul, if you want, than in your external body movements. So I think that's about an honest answer on your question. And one appendix to this, of course, I can't escape wishing to be as helpful and inspiring to my own home country, to the Czech Republic. So I must say that however I enjoy being everywhere else, and Bamberg is an absolutely amazing place and a fortune to me, I mean, in terms of artistic work, I just think every time I conduct back at home, I feel somehow more excited, because that's where you come from and that's where you want to return, and giving back what you got from there. And as I said last time, I promise, inspire people around yourself. So probably just being a good inspirer and serve your home country is a very natural feeling I have inside of me.
My guest in episode 9 of Czech Next Wave was the great conductor, and I'm sure you'll agree, great speaker, Jakub Hrůša. And if you're listening to this before March 15th, do keep an eye out for the Grammy results, because Jakub is nominated in the Best Classical Instrumental Solo category for a recording of Dvořák's Violin Concerto with Augustin Hadalich and the Bavarian Radio Orchestra for the LP Bohemian Tales. And by a wonderful coincidence, also nominated for a Grammy is Andrej Pivac, who created the theme music for our podcast. You've been listening to Czech Next Wave, produced by the Czech Centres Network and Radio Prague International. If you're new to the pod, why not check out the earlier editions? And of course, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Ian Willoughby. Thank you very much indeed for listening, and speak to you again very soon.